Hello, Jim Miskell here. Let's Talk Estate Planning is the podcast. You are in the right place if you want to talk about estate planning or hear me talk about estate planning. In previous episodes, we have talked about some of the potential pitfalls, which is fun to say, potential pitfalls of using these DIY platforms to do estate planning. How there can be some drawbacks that cause issues for the family later. Lately, there's been a new player in the arena, and that is artificial intelligence. So today we're going to talk about using AI as a tool to get your estate planning done. Is that a good idea, or does it have the same drawbacks as the other DIY platforms? I will tell you that the biggest problem, this is a spoiler, the biggest problem to using AI to do your estate planning, it's not AI. Thanks for joining me. This is Let's Talk Estate Planning, the podcast that's dedicated to the proposition that when folks have their estate planning in place, families get along better when times of transition, grief, and crisis occur because they've got a roadmap, expectations are set, they know what to do, and they're not running around town trying to do a bunch of administrative stuff when they should be together, supporting each other, which is what family should be all about. My name is Jim Miskell. I have been a practicing attorney in the state of Georgia for more than 30 years. My practice is exclusively in the areas of estate planning, elder law, probate, estate and trust administration, and related areas. This podcast is not legal advice. It is for the purposes of education and information, hopefully a little bit of entertainment, but does not constitute legal advice, because legal advice only happens when you're sitting across the table from an attorney that you've hired to listen to you and ask you questions. Attorneys, they say, no matter what question you ask them, they say, it depends. And it's true, because it probably depends on more details that they need to give you a good answer. It depends is almost always followed by a set of questions from that attorney to find out the important information so that they can answer the question well for you. That's when legal advice and legal representation occurs, when you're sitting across the table from somebody that can have that conversation with you and answer those questions. Again, this is just a podcast. If you have questions or this sparks ideas and you need to talk to an attorney, if you're in the state of Georgia, set an appointment with my office and we'll get those personal questions answered. In the meantime, let's get back to today's topic, which is all about using artificial intelligence. My buddy, Gemini, Claude, Perplexity, Alexa, Siri, all my good buddies to be co-pilots. See what I did there? Co-pilots for me in creating my estate planning. Sorry, Grok, to leave you out. So what's this idea about? This all happened, and the idea here is because a couple weeks ago, somebody called the office and said, we've got this estate planning that I've done with AI, and I'm really excited about it. I want to bring it in, and I want you to review it. So it occurred to me that this was time just to update some of the conversation that we've had over the course of time about DIY estate planning, using platforms and tools that are designed to help lay people get their estate planning in order. So with AI as one of these tools, I wanted to talk about a couple areas of concern. And the first is the source. These are large language models, which means they're going and grabbing information from many, many different sources. They depend a great deal upon things that are easily accessible. Things like, I don't know, Reddit threads and Facebook posts and things like that. And if I tell you that there's misinformation and misunderstanding about estate planning in a high percentage of Reddit posts and Facebook posts about estate planning, you would not be surprised. A lot of people have ideas that are different from how things actually work. I talk a lot about how there's common sense going on over here and the law is over here. But if there's a Venn diagram between the law and common sense, there may be some overlap, but a lot of times things work in the law in a way that's different than you would expect them to. And there may be good reasons for that. There may not. But the fact is that coming new to an area of practice, even for an experienced attorney, there are things that you have not had experience with that you're not alerted to until you encounter them. And so that has been one of the things that we've talked about with the other DIY platforms, that's one of the drawbacks is you don't know what you don't know. And unfortunately, a lot of the information that has been sort of vacuumed up by these large language models is large popular opinion. What I mean by that is if you've got any experience working with a Chat GPT or Gemini or a Claude or something like that, and you ask general information, Copilot included in this, you ask for a general, give me an answer on this, you'll find that you sort of get this consensus reply back, and that it reflects what articles may be out there. Maybe there's some recency bias to it. In addition to that sort of recency bias, there's just this sort of general consensus problem with it, that practice of law and estate planning is very particular, and it's not about a consensus. It's about what the common law says, it's about what the statutory scheme says, and it's about what the current case law in your state says based upon that common law and the statutory scheme. Not necessarily what somebody on Facebook thinks or what somebody put in a Reddit thread. So that's one of the problems. Another issue is, let's say you go, oh, I know that there's Google Scholar out there and there are cases that the large language models can get. One of the adages that you'll hear from attorneys from time to time, you hear it in law school and you hear it practicing attorneys, is that bad facts can make bad law. What does that mean? It means that weird cases get to the appellate courts. Your run-of-the-mill, how things should normally work, and those sorts of things aren't usually causing trial court opinions that end up getting accepted for appeal and get written opinions from appellate courts. What I mean there, I mean that a lot of times appellate opinions are about a really weird factual situation, something that sort of strains credibility, that's outside the norm. And if you've listened to, I did a recent podcast about what I called kind of a law school exam hypothetical seeming probate situation that went multi-generational with a lot of fits and starts along the way. It's those kinds of cases where things are unusual that make law. Also, when you get a decision from an appellate court that is approved or not approved, it's limited very often not just to that particular phrasing that might be in a trust or in a will that's the subject, but it's also, you got to be careful in these readings that it's not just the legal provisions, but it's also the factual situation in that case. So that's one of the things you find out pretty quickly in law school and as an attorney, is that holdings of cases can be limited to the factual circumstances, and it's a pretty nuanced thing. With this limitation, the other thing I would suggest is that really well-drafted trusts, really well-drafted wills, they never get to the appellate courts. There aren't written opinions about those because they worked. And the only time you get written opinions is when something didn't work, when there's a conflict, when the trust failed to do what it was supposed to, when the will didn't work the way it was supposed to, when a prenup failed, whatever it is. It's not the provisions that work well that end up being written about. So there's a limitation. What you've got is sort of all the defects out there in the scholarly material, and then you've got this sort of common understanding of how things, and common sense, again, common understanding and common sense doesn't have a whole lot to do very often with how law works. So that's one problem, is sort of the source material. What is it that the large language models have taken in from which they're giving you this opinion? And as I say, if you've got some experience with that, you'll find that you sort of get these broad strokes opinion, that's what everybody says. It's common knowledge, those sorts of things, which is not very helpful or very precise. Hey, Jim Miskell here. Sorry to interrupt the episode. Hope you're enjoying today's content. A lot of times when folks are thinking about this kind of thing, questions spring to mind. If you have questions, we like to do some question and answer episodes. So you can go to our website, letstalkestateplanning.com, and shoot us a message and say, hey, on the podcast, I'd like Jim to cover this on the next question and answer session. Or if it's hitting closer home, especially if you're a Georgia resident, Of course, we can't give legal advice on the podcast because it's not specific for your situation. But if you got a situation that you need to handle, it's important to get that done. So let's talk estateplanning.com is how to contact the office. I'd love to talk with you about the specifics of your situation and make sure your estate plan is everything that your family should have it be. In the meantime, we're going to go back to the episode. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to talk to you soon. The other thing are sort of the biases that you might get from the large language model. One being there can be a recency bias or just a volume of material bias, that there's a higher volume of material about a given point than another can sort of skew the importance of that material in the way that the model balances it. The other thing is that these things are obsequious, and if you catch them in an error, and you can ask opinions and go back and say, well, that's not actually right. I might put something in chat or Claude or any of them, and it'd come back and they'd say, well, actually the pets, although they can be beneficiaries, are not actual heirs at law. And the response you get when you catch something that's incorrect on that is always really fawning. Oh, you're right, Jim. You're correct. And boy, is that a new haircut? You look good today. There's always this bending over backwards to make the user feel comfortable, like they're well liked, and that you want to continue to use this platform. And that's a real difficulty when you're dealing with legal issues, because I've heard it said, and I don't guess it's untrue, that 3 years of law school teach lawyers how to look at things and figure out all the reasons they won't work. And so it's a very sort of elimination-based kind of thought process necessary to the task at hand. It's sort of just the opposite for the large language models. They want you to like them. They want you to think they like you. And so there's always this approval of your thought process. And so there's actually sort of a confirmation bias built in there. So it's sort of the source material can be problematic. Also, these kind of biases that are built into the way the models work can be problematic as well. But with those two things, let's say that the source material is perfect, and let's say you've figured out a way to get the chat bot that you're working with to actually give you a no compliments, no fawning sort of response, a straight up, give me the nitty gritty kind of response. So let's say you solve those two problems. That leads us to the third, and I think the largest problem. And the largest problem with using AI is the same as it is with the other platforms. And the biggest problem with using AI to generate your estate planning is not AI. It's you, my friend. You don't know what prompts to put in. Even if you know how to do prompts in an expert fashion for whatever large language model you're using, you don't have any experience sitting down with families and working through probates with families, administering estates, designing plans that work, seeing which ones that work over time, see which ones that families have more difficulties and need more assistance with over time. You don't know what you don't know, and you just can't say, hey, chat, tell me what I don't know. Oh, you know everything, Jim. Oh, and you look great today, by the way. You sound especially intelligent today. Thanks, chat. It's just not set up to teach you everything from the ground up. You will notice if you look at a lot of attorneys' business cards that they say not just attorney, not just lawyer, they say and counselor at law. And it's the counselor at law part that is really valuable. Estate planning is not necessarily rocket science. Probate is not necessarily rocket science, but it's inexperience in the areas that cause people problems over time when they try and do it themselves. And that's where somebody with some experience can actually save money, although there's an investment in their time through fees to engage their experience on your behalf. AI can be great for things where you've got the opportunity to try it and go back and refashion it. Any area of law is like that too. I sat down to do some planning last week with a good friend of mine and colleague who I've known for many years. And he's an expert criminal litigator. He's an excellent personal injury litigator, plaintiff's attorney. And I sat down with him to work with his mother, who's been widowed in the last couple of years. His father passed away a couple of years ago. to set their plan up. And he said, I'm good at what I do, but I know I don't do what you do. So I'm happy to engage you to do it. And even other lawyers know that they shouldn't just try and wing it themselves, because here's the thing about estate planning that differs from other areas of law. If you make a mistake on something else, whether it's building something, whether it's creating your own contract, those sorts of things, you can learn over time and you can improve that. When estate planning fails, you don't get the chance to improve the plan because you're dead. You get one shot at it. And if it's right, it works well for your family. And if it's not, they'll do the best they can with it. But if you're taking enough time to set out to do it, you care enough about your family to want it done correctly. And even all the power of AI doesn't give you the experience to look critically at the situations, to look critically at the dynamics, perhaps, of family relationships, at your own situation dispassionately, and to know what various options there may be and what might work best for your family based on the character of the people that are involved. So that is why you sit down with a professional, because the professionals can do it right the first time. And estate planning, different than many other things, you only get one shot at it. Because again, when estate planning fails, you can't stop and fix it because you're dead. So on that happy note, I appreciate you joining me just for these thoughts today about some of the drawbacks of using AI. It may be better than some of the other platforms, but I really don't think it is, because where all these DIY platforms fail, it's that there's a lack of experience, understanding of the context of this task that's at hand. And again, it's prepping for a time where you're no longer able, because you're either disabled, you're in a disabled state and you're still alive, or you've passed away. And in both of those situations, you can't come back and tweak it and make it work a little bit better. It's really worth your time to sit down with somebody who's got some experience to make sure it's done right, because there's no second time. You got to get it right the first time. I'm Jim Miskell, and I really appreciate you spending some time today with me on this episode. If the topic today has made you interested in learning more, there are a lot of different episodes of the podcast. You can reference those. If you're ready to get down to doing some planning for your family, you're ready to sit down with an attorney to ask those questions about it depends, what's it depend upon, and they're going to ask you those questions so they can get it right for your family. Call us up and make an appointment. You can find the information to get in touch with my firm. Well, it's letstalkestateplanning.com. We're the estate planning law group of Georgia. If you are in Georgia, I'd be more than happy to meet with you to talk about these issues so you can get the answers that apply to your family and your situation. Until next time, thanks.